99X and the Morning X. It's Barnes and Leslie. And Leslie, what is the number one thing we love to talk about the most?
True crime.
That's right. And I have to say, we don't love the crime part of it. We love the true part of it. And we don't like that there are victims to true crime. But how do you think Dateline and 48 Hours and all these shows get by?
We try to help people, though, with this.
So here's one for you that I have stumbled upon that if you haven't heard of it yet, you're going to be saving it to your podcast list very quickly. Let me try to set it up as easy as I can. If you've been married before, you know how stressful it is, right? Wedding planners and everything you have to do, like the week of the ceremony, you got family in town, last minute things, brunches, dinners, receptions, blah, blah, blah. It's all overwhelming. So that's why you hire a wedding planner, someone who can help take all of this stress off of you and someone that can focus on the details and just making sure that everything on the biggest day of your life is on track. So,
to make your life easier.
What if the wedding planner turns out to be a scammer?
Well, that's not good.
Someone who helped people that plans the perfect day. This person is a crook.
Lawsuits, anniversary parties, talking about it on this podcast. Sure, these things can help a little bit, but there's no replacing what's been taken away from them.
We don't have a video. I don't have the last moments. The photographer did not take pictures with my dad and I. So many things that were missing from that day. So it wasn't really about the money, because we didn't care about that. But the fact that we missed, on our day that we can never get back, all of those things are missing.
I love on podcasts, by the way, when they do the little stinger risk. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so you're about to meet a guy who decided after this happened to him to take things into his own hands.
I have a question for you. If you had to wear a wire, a wire, like they put on snitches in the movies, would you know what to do? Like where to put it, or how to get the best sound, or how to make sure the damn thing doesn't fall off? Basically, how do you go undercover when it's your first time? It's certainly not something I knew anything about for most of my life, but I've been learning a lot of new skills because I am hunting a con man.
Introducing one brave mofo.
Yeah.
His name is Justin Sayles. Hey, Justin.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
I'm fascinated.
Let's get into it. So,
yes.
I mean,
let's do it.
When did this happen?
So one thing to clarify, I was not scammed on my wedding. I met this guy in a different scam, and then I found out he was scamming people's
I thought you
wedding.
were scammed by him in a wedding context.
No. So, no, I found out that Are you
scamming us right now? Are you really?
That people ask me that. People ask me that. But no, I'm not smart enough for that. I'm just good enough to make a podcast.
I thought that was you, but you were scammed in a different way.
I was scammed in a different way. So it was, so I'm originally from the East Coast. Yep. You might hear a little bit of an accent. I live in Los Angeles now. I have for almost a decade. And when I first moved out here, I was recruited for a job that ended up being totally bogus. And the guy was this incredibly strange, charismatic figure that he told us he had a trust fund. He told us his dad was a coal tycoon and he inherited all this money. And he wanted to create the next Huffington Post, but better, was the tagline. And he went around saying this all the time. And I worked there for roughly a month. And then he shut the place down and no one got paid. And no one could find anything about this guy online. And it was the strangest thing. And there were people who had worked for him for a few months. And this is what the first episode is all about, right? They had worked for him for a few months. No one got paid. There were people out tens of thousands of dollars. There were people who had left other jobs. But we couldn't figure anything out about this guy. There was no trace of him online. There was no coal tycoon dad that we could find. So a couple years later, some things pop up that he had created his own catering and wedding planning business, and I started digging in, and that's when I found that his next scam and his most heartbreaking scam was basically taking people's money to do their weddings and then either not showing up or basically providing the level of service that we could throw together right this second.
That was really confusing because the person who told me about the podcast, I have not listened to it yet. It's next in my queue. Even reading the introduction to it, it talks about you tracking this mysterious figure of a man who once wronged you, but the title Wedding Scammer led me to believe it was you that was scammed in the wedding.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. He's a multi-tiered scammer.
Oh, he's all over the place. So we went with the name The Wedding Scammer because, you know, it just jumps off the page.
Yeah.
We cycled through a half dozen names for this, and The Wedding Scammer stuck just because of how emotional these stories are. Because, you know, when we think of scammers, we think of a lot of times like Elizabeth Holmes or Bernie Madoff or right now Sam Bankman-Fried's in the news. And that's not stuff that the average person like can always relate to. But with weddings, everyone, you know, I don't want to say everyone. I know there are plenty of people out here who don't get married, but many, many, many people get married, and everyone understands how stressful that is, whether you've been married or not, and everyone understands how expensive that is. And those stories really resonated with people.
Well, just hearing the audio of that woman, I mean, that is your whole life, and then you have nothing from the wedding, you know, as she was saying. Did you find this guy? Where is he?
Well, I can't spoil where he is right now, but he is still out there, and I did find him.
Is this going to be in another episode of The Wedding Scammer?
This is going to be in another episode of The Wedding Scammer. He is, here's the scary thing. He is still out there operating.
No way.
Because the number one thing I learned from making this podcast is the laws are not equipped to deal with low-level scammers.
Wait, you find him and he doesn't go to jail?
The podcast just came out.
Oh my gosh.
We're 2 episodes in.
But what's interesting is, though, that you found him because sometimes it's impossible to find these scammers.
So another fascinating part about this story, and this is something that we play up from time to time throughout the series, and then it actually becomes a focal point in one of the later episodes. When people realize that the law can't help you out, so in many cases, right? And I don't want to, this is definitely not an insult to law enforcement, but the reality is this stuff can be confusing. These guys operate with aliases. They'll set up LLCs. It's just a very, very, very confusing things. And you bring it to local law enforcement who has to deal with violent crimes. They have to deal with other things. And they're just not trained for this. They're not equipped for this sometimes. So they kind of just shrug their shoulders. And then you say, well, what about the FBI? Well, sometimes this situation, FBI is not going to come in for like, okay, we got $20,000 here, $30,000 here. Basically, it's a situation where if you can, your remedies are often civil courts. And how do you sue someone who's using a fake name? How do you sue someone that you don't know where they are and they're changing their location every 6 months? And it just becomes a very confusing situation. And people like this can just slip through the cracks.
Justin Sayles is here. He's got a top 20, by the way. Congratulations, as we sit right now, number 17 on the true crime charts. That ain't easy to do, by the way, with the new podcast, Wedding Scammer. What was it like when, and I'm assuming you can answer this, when you get on this trail to find him, when you finally come face to face with this guy? What was that like?
You know, it was funny because I'd met him 7 years earlier when he scammed me. And by the way, me and about 50 other people that he hired to work in person. Sure. It was an absolutely crazy situation. I wasn't sure how he was going to react, so I put on an honest-to-God wire. Like I shaved my chest and everything, and I put on a wire. And we start the series right there with the wire, and then we work our way back to it. And that comes up in the episode where I confront him. It was the most surreal day of my life because this is a man that I had been scammed by 7 years earlier and then the truth is I had spent about 3 years working on this, or 2.5 years at that point working on this show. And his location just kind of fell into my lap, and we just decided if I wear a wire, that's going to be the best way to make sure he doesn't run. If I run up to him with a microphone screaming, I'm a journalist that you scammed 7 years ago, he might just run. And
he thought you were just there, like, coming back for more.
He thought that I was just showing up at, by the way, the wedding venue that he currently runs.
Oh.
I showed up. It was honestly the most nerve-wracking experience to once you get there, right? Like it almost feels surreal, and then all of a sudden I find myself seated about 5 feet from him, unveiling who I am, almost scamming him back, right? Saying, right, because I did a little bit of espionage for a second, right? You know,
I was fair. You scam and
Your
scam.
heart must have been racing.
It was absolutely crazy. It didn't hit me until I was about 5 feet from his face. And the craziest thing, he ended up talking to me for a while.
Ooh.
And we're going to hear that on the podcast,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yes. The final few episodes are a lot of his voice.
Justin, I mean, I'm thinking you're going to get your own Netflix series. It reminds me a lot of the scammer series that Barnes and I have watched, like The Tinder Swindler, who ended up, I think, globally swindling people, scamming people over $10 million. Do you know how much he got away with?
We're not quite at 10 million, but I think that when I add up all of his cases and like literally what he owes under various aliases, we are close to, if not over $1 million.
Wow.
Jeez. All right, dude, thank you for the tease, first of all, because I am so in now.
Me too.
Before, I was confused, like I was saying, reading about what it was, and I was excited to have you on, and now I'm even more excited to hear it.
We're all in.
It's called The Wedding Scammer, wherever you get your podcast. Justin, dude, I'm going to have to call you once I finish with the whole podcast, because I'm going to have questions.
Wait till you get to the wire part. That's my favorite part.
I'm in. Thank you very much. Go find it. It's called The Wedding Scammer. That is Justin Sayles. And this, my friends, is 99X.